What happens when the people sworn to protect become part of the story? When new footage surfaces, not from a bystander's phone, but from the very cameras meant to ensure safety, the entire narrative begins to shift. Today, America is asking difficult questions again. Newly recovered security footage has led to the quiet arrest of one of Charlie Kirk's own guards, a man once trusted to stand between chaos and safety. This isn't a story about politics. It's a story about duty and the cost of failing it. For months, the nation believed the case was solved. A lone suspect, an open and shut tragedy. But in the background, evidence was waiting, silent, unacknowledged, unseen. And now, that evidence speaks. In this investigation, we retrace the final minutes before the shots rang out, the newly revealed footage that changed everything, and the quiet arrest that challenges what we thought we knew. Because sometimes, the most painful truths aren't hidden in darkness. They're recorded in plain sight by the very eyes that were supposed to keep watch. Before we dive into this story, remember, this is Detective Kate, True Crime, a channel that stands for justice and giving every case the attention it deserves. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our investigations. And don't forget, share your thoughts and theories below. Every clue counts. Breaking news, newly released security footage has led to the arrest of one of Charlie Kirk's own security guards, a shocking twist in a case that has already shaken the nation. Authorities confirm the footage, recovered from a secondary campus surveillance feed, reveals inconsistencies in the guard's movements moments before the gunfire that ended Kirk's life. The man was taken into custody early this morning in Provo, Utah, on charges related to evidence tampering and obstruction. Investigators say the discovery raises new questions about how the tragedy unfolded and who may have failed to act when it mattered most. Please make sure you comment. While listening to this update, we will make sure we respond to everything. That's a proof that we are fighting for justice and what is right. For weeks, the official story was clear. One shooter, one motive, one case closed. But now, that certainty is gone. As the footage circulates online and investigators reopen key files, the case that once seemed straightforward now exposes a far deeper question, not about who fired the weapon, but about who looked away. This is the story of trust broken, evidence revealed, and a nation forced to face the uncomfortable truth, even among protectors. Silence can become complicity. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. The air was charged, the hall overflowing with students, cameras, and anticipation. Charlie Kirk had just arrived on stage, greeted by cheers and flashes of light. His words echoed through the packed auditorium, confident, measured, familiar. For a moment, it felt like just another speech, until the noise changed. Witnesses say it started with a flicker of confusion, a sudden shift in the crowd's rhythm, a gasp from the front row, then silence. And in that silence came two cracks, sharp, echoing, irreversible. Panic erupted. The audience scattered, security rushed toward the stage, and shouts filled the air. Phones hit the floor, chairs overturned, and the once orderly event dissolved into chaos. Cameras captured flashes of movement, guards scrambling, police shouting, people crying out for help. On stage, Kirk lay motionless. Medics were called. Officers pressed through the confusion to detain a young man near the east exit, Tyler Robinson, 22 years old. Within minutes, he was in custody, as sirens wailed across the campus. Outside, the night pulsed with flashing lights and disbelief. Students huddled together, some praying, others recording. Reporters gathered behind police tape, narrating through trembling voices as America watched the tragedy unfold live. By 7:28 p.m., hospital officials confirmed the unthinkable. Charlie Kirk was gone. The news spread faster than the sirens could fade, leaving behind questions, grief, and a chilling truth. Even in a room full of protection, no one saw it coming. That night would mark the beginning of one of the most scrutinized investigations in modern political history, a case that seemed clear, until the cameras told a different story. In the days that followed, the investigation moved fast, almost too fast. Within 24 hours, law enforcement announced the arrest of Tyler Robinson, labeling him the sole suspect in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The evidence, they said, was overwhelming. A weapon recovered near the scene, ballistics matching the fatal rounds, text messages that hinted at anger toward Kirk's rhetoric. Every briefing painted Robinson as the lone actor, a disturbed young man whose actions were fueled by ideology and impulse. Reporters repeated the same phrase over and over: case closed. Prosecutors spoke with conviction. The public was told that justice was swift, that the system worked, that the story was as simple as it seemed. But even in those first briefings, cracks began to show. A few witnesses whispered about inconsistencies, about figures moving near the side entrance, about moments missing from official footage. A campus officer questioned why certain surveillance angles had been sealed under technical review. Still, the headlines pushed forward. Lone gunman apprehended. An America desperate for clarity believed it. Candlelight vigils turned to court updates. Grief turned into commentary. The narrative was set: a single man, one weapon, one tragic act. Yet behind the polished podiums and neatly worded statements, something felt unfinished. Files were classified without explanation. A few security staff quietly transferred or resigned. And though officials promised full transparency, the most crucial footage, the one camera that caught the east side of the stage, was never released. To the public, the case seemed resolved. To those looking closer, it was only beginning. Then, nearly a month after the tragedy, came the footage that changed everything. Hidden deep within the evidence archive, a body cam recording from a campus officer was quietly rediscovered. It wasn't part of the initial release, not mentioned in early reports, and for weeks, no one outside the investigation even knew it existed. But when analysts reviewed it, frame by frame, what they saw sent shockwaves through the entire case file. The video begins routinely: wide shots of the rally perimeter, radio chatter between units, flashes of security vests moving through the crowd. But at 6:41 p.m., barely a minute before the first gunshot, something unusual happens. A guard, later confirmed as Ethan Cole, a private contractor assigned to Kirk's security team, steps out of formation near the east gate. He adjusts his earpiece, glances toward the stage, then taps his radio twice. The light on his transmitter changes, not the color used for the Turning Point USA security channel, but a private frequency registered to an unknown device. Cole pauses for several seconds, seemingly speaking into his mic, then turns away from his post, leaving a direct line of sight to the stage completely unguarded. Moments later, the shots ring out. The footage freezes there, a still image of a man walking away from duty seconds before chaos unfolds. Investigators called it a critical observation. Others called it the moment the narrative cracked. When the video surfaced internally, the reaction was immediate. Federal agents reopened portions of the investigation. Forensic analysts traced Cole's radio use, discovering he'd switched channels twice in under a minute, once before the shooting, and once immediately after. It wasn't proof of guilt, but it was proof of negligence. And in a case that had already divided a nation, that single clip reignited the question no one wanted to ask out loud. If a man tasked with protection stepped away, even for a moment, is that just bad timing, or something far worse? As investigators dug deeper, the story behind the arrest began to unfold, not through one shocking revelation, but through a slow, unsettling pattern of oversight and neglect. Internal records obtained by federal auditors painted a troubling picture: rushed background checks, incomplete personnel files, and private contractors cleared for duty without full vetting. He owns employment documents showed gaps, missing reference verifications, a security clearance marked pending, and a background check finalized 3 days after the event. Communication logs from that night revealed further lapses. Security teams were operating on 3 separate radio frequencies, yet only 2 were actively monitored by command staff. Several critical transmissions, including Cole's frequency switch minutes before the gunfire, were never documented in the official after-action report. Investigators also uncovered a series of missing incident reports, forms that should have been filed by on-site supervisors within 24 hours of the shooting. 6 of those reports, all connected to private security contractors, were never submitted. When questioned, company executives cited technical errors and staff turnover. But the documents told a harsher truth. The system wasn't sabotaged. It was simply broken. In the pursuit of efficiency, corners were cut. In the name of speed, judgment was suspended. The layers of protection meant to shield a public figure failed not from conspiracy, but from complacency. One investigator, speaking off record, described it bluntly. This wasn't about one man making a bad choice. It was about an entire chain of people who didn't stop to ask the right questions. And perhaps that was the hardest truth to confront, that in the machinery of security, paperwork can matter as much as bravery. What happened at Utah Valley University wasn't just the story of a tragedy. It was a story of human failure, of responsibility deferred, of silent assumptions that no one thought would ever be tested. When news of the guard's arrest broke, the reaction was instant and raw. Across television networks, headlines blazed, security lapses confirmed in Kirk assassination. For a country already grieving, it wasn't just disbelief, it was betrayal. Crowds gathered outside courthouses, university gates, and city halls, holding candles and signs that read he deserved protection. Commentators spoke through trembling voices, replaying the same question over and over. How could this happen? It wasn't anger at a single man anymore. It was disappointment in an entire system that had promised safety and delivered chaos. Parents of students who attended the rally spoke of fear, of trust lost. Lawmakers called for hearings. Online, the story turned into a mirror, reflecting a nation forced to admit that somewhere between policy and protocol, humanity had been forgotten. The footage of the guard stepping away, just seconds before the gunfire, aired on every major network. Viewers watched in silence, knowing what would happen next, wishing someone had shouted, "Don't move." Journalists described it as the moment America realized that the people trained to stand between danger and safety had looked away, if only for a moment. But that moment cost a life, and with it the illusion of control. Vigils turned somber. The usual rhetoric, thoughts and prayers, "Justice will prevail," felt hollow this time. There was a quiet guilt, an unspoken understanding that no amount of hindsight could rewrite those seconds. Across the nation, one sentiment echoed louder than politics or ideology. He trusted the system. The system failed him. And in that truth, America saw not just the loss of Charlie Kirk, but the loss of its own faith, in procedure, in accountability, and in the promise that protection would always mean safety. In the aftermath of the revelations, the case began to stretch far beyond one man's death. It became a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths about trust, oversight, and accountability. Legal experts warned that the implications reached into the heart of public security itself. If those sworn or paid to protect could operate under incomplete vetting, ignored procedures, and unseen private channels, then what did protection truly mean? Federal hearings began quietly, behind closed doors. Lawmakers questioned not only how a single guard slipped through the cracks, but how entire systems allowed it to happen. Agencies exchanged blame. Universities pointed to private contractors. Contractors pointed to policy loopholes. And the Department of Justice pointed to underfunded oversight. In that tangle of bureaucracy, one question echoed louder than any legal argument. Who watches the protectors? Ethicists weighed in, calling the case a moral failure as much as a procedural one. They spoke of a culture too focused on optics, badges, uniforms, and press releases, rather than the quiet, meticulous discipline of accountability. When safety becomes a performance, they warned, real vigilance fades into routine. The debate blurred the line between negligence and betrayal, a question that no policy manual could truly answer. Outside the legal chambers, the public watched uneasily. Parents, citizens, and political leaders all realized that this wasn't just about one event. It was about the fragile trust placed in those who guard lives, stages, and power. The Charlie Kirk case had begun as a tragedy, evolved into an investigation, and was now a reckoning, not just for security agencies, but for every system built on the promise of protection. Because when oversight fails, when checks go unchecked, the question isn't only who pulled the trigger. It's who allowed the danger to stand that close. In the end, no investigation, no trial, and no statement could undo what happened that day. The reports will sit in archives, the footage sealed behind evidence codes, the headlines slowly fading into digital dust. But the questions, they remain. Who failed first? Was it the guard who stepped away, the supervisor who skipped a report, or the official who signed a clearance without reading the fine print? Who stayed silent when something didn't feel right? How many moments of hesitation, how many unchecked boxes, how many small compromises stacked quietly into catastrophe? The tragedy at Utah Valley University was not born in a single second of violence. It was built over days, months, and choices made in comfort. For a nation that prides itself on vigilance, this case is more than a wound. It's a warning. Because protection isn't measured in uniforms or credentials, it's measured in conscience. And sometimes betrayal doesn't pull the trigger, it stands guard beside it.